take our time and go through this.
Perfect. Okay, we are live. Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. On today's show, I have a very special guest, a returning guest. His name is Mark Shaw. If you listen to my show over the last few years, you've probably heard his name. He's a very accomplished scholar and writer. He's written many books. We were just talking in the pre-show about when our first interview was. It was back in 2021. I think we've done 8 or 9 since then. I think our first one was Collateral, on his book Collateral Damage: The Mysterious Deaths of Marilyn Monroe, Dorothy Kilgallen, and the Ties that Bind Them to Robert Kennedy and the JFK Assassination. So I think that was one of our first ones. But we've also done some, he's written on a bunch of different subjects. But we've done other ones. We did one this year about the release of new assassination files. That was our most recent, was in March 2025. And that pertains to what we're going to talk about today. We also talked in 2023 about RFK Jr., so the son of Robert F. Kennedy. He repeated the assertion that the CIA killed JFK. We also did a follow-up on his first book. We discussed Fighting for Justice: The Improbable Journey to Exposing Cover-Ups about JFK assassinations and the death of Marilyn Monroe and Dorothy Kilgallen. So that was 2023. And then we also talked about somebody who's kind of an important person in the JFK assassination, but also a person who's important in his own rights, Melvin Belli. And Mark published a book titled Melvin Belli, King of the Courtroom. And then we also did a great book on Mike Tyson. I really suggest this book. People go check it out. Mm-hmm. The full title of that is Down for the Count: Shocking Truth Behind the Mike Tyson Rape Trial. A lot of this stuff got covered up. So I think that Mike got a kind of raw deal for sure. That's a light way of putting it. But today, if you're watching this on my YouTube channels, I just got them back. So I don't know how long it'll be that these YouTube channels stay up. But if you're watching on YouTube or X Twitter or Rockfin or Rumble, you'll see the title of his new book, just published within the last month. Today is December 2025, or in December 2025. Full title of his new book is Abuse of Power: Connecting Robert Kennedy's Assassination with the Murders of JFK and Dorothy Kilgallen. Exposes who was responsible and why Sirhan deserves a new trial. So welcome back to the show, Mark Shaw.
Thank you very much, William. I appreciate it.
For people who hadn't heard our earlier maybe conversations, you've had a long storied career and a very accomplished writer. Maybe you can talk about your kind of corpus of all your work and your many books, and then what led up to the publication of Abuse of Power.
Yeah, let's look at that list of the books that you have that you can put up, because it has been quite an interesting journey that leads to this new book. And the next one I think is the slide. And it's interesting you mentioned Melvin Belli. Yeah, right there. So let's start there so people will understand kind of how this all evolved. I never was going to even write about matters dealing with the JFK assassination or Robert Kennedy or Marilyn or anything else. I wasn't going to get involved in that. But I practiced law in the mid-1980s with Melvin Belli, famous San Francisco attorney, mostly known for being the first lawyer who sued all the pharmaceutical companies and got $1 million verdicts. I knew him from the mid-'80s, and we became friends. I had an office in his building, and in fact, he took me to the Major League Baseball All-Star game and all that kind of stuff. And while I was interested in Belli, I found out that he had written 2 autobiographies, and get this, the autobiographies, which were his story, conflicted. So in 1996, I wrote Melvin Belli, King of the Courtroom, trying to show the realism of what Belli was like. Married 6 times, represented the Rolling Stones, just a bigger than life person. And while writing that book, I found out that he was very much a mafia wannabe. His main client was a Los Angeles gangster named Mickey Cohen, and he is going to figure in to what we're going to talk about when I connect Carlos Marcello, the mobster, with Robert Kennedy's death. We'll get to that in a while. So I wrote that book, and then I was done. And then I learned about Belli, and I knew he represented Jack Ruby at his trial for the killing of Lee Harvey Oswald. but I also knew about the 1960 election being fixed by Joe Kennedy. This is interesting because the people that are watching will be interested because Joe Kennedy wanted to be president of the United States. He had millions of dollars. He was a powerful figure, but he was then the ambassador to Great Britain. And while he was over there, unfortunately, this was during World War II, he made a friend of Adolf Hitler and disgraced himself. When he came back to the United States, he knew that he could not be presidential material. So he thought to himself, I got all this money, I got all this power. I'm going to make Joe Kennedy Jr. president of the United States, but he got killed in the war. Then JFK, then RFK, and then Bobby Kennedy. A dynasty of Kennedys in the White House. And Ted Kennedy was in there too. So, I was most interested in that, but Joe knew the first one was a problem because right up to the election in 1960 against Richard Nixon, they were going to lose that election. So Joe, who had been involved in bootlegging and some illicit activities along the way, had some contacts through Frank Sinatra, who was a friend of his, with some mobsters. And they included people like Sam Giancana and Carlos Marcello and Santo Trafficante and all these guys. So he had Sinatra get in touch with them and said, look, you help us win the 1960 election, and we will leave you alone when we're in the White House. Well, they helped. They won West Virginia and Illinois, and JFK became president of the United States. So what happened then? What to do with Bobby Kennedy? Because he had not distinguished himself. He'd never tried any cases in the courtroom. The only thing that he had done was go ahead and work on a rackets commission with his brother, JFK, looking to squash out all of the mobsters, all of the underworld people in the country. While he was doing that, he wrote a book, which is the linchpin to everything that happened after that with regard to the deaths of JFK, Dorothy Kilgallen, and Robert Kennedy, called Enemy Within. Maybe you have heard of it.
Yes,
And if you can imagine, just after the mafia had helped them win the election, some of the things that he wrote in the book were as follows. These men are sleek, often bilious and fat, or lean and cold and hard. They have the smooth faces and cruel eyes of gangsters. They wear the same rich clothes, the diamond ring, the jeweled watch, the strong, sickly smelling perfume. You can imagine, I'm sure, William, what those gangsters thought of that after they'd helped, after they got help to win the election, and now he was going ahead and saying those things. This book really has 3 true crime murder mysteries in it that never should have been mysteries to begin with. JFK, Dorothy Kilgallen, and Robert Kennedy, as we'll get to. But it all started with that letter and the fact that then in April of 1961, Robert Kennedy, who hated this one gangster named Carlos Marcello, who we'll talk about as being the most powerful female, most powerful mobster in the country, from New Orleans and all of that. He went after Marcello, basically double-crossing what they had told those men they would do if they helped them win the White House. And what did he do? He basically had his attorney general people and everything else. He became attorney general and had them go ahead and trick Marcello to going to an immigration center in New Orleans, where they arrested him, put him on a plane, and flew him into the jungles of Central America. And of course, as you can imagine, Marcello wasn't too happy about that. He almost died there. And when he got back into the United States, he vowed revenge. Nick Pileggi, who's the famous author of Wise Guy, which became Goodfellas, who gave me some nice endorsements for my book, said to me one time, you know what the middle name of Sicilians is? Revenge. So now you've got Marcello saying to himself, look, I cannot let JFK become president, because if he does, Robert Kennedy then, excuse me. I cannot go ahead and I want to kill Bobby Kennedy, but if I do, JFK will come after me with everything the government has. So he says to himself, okay, I've got to eliminate JFK, so Bobby Kennedy will be powerless. And so I've shown in my books, including the bestseller, The Reporter Who Knew Too Much, that Marcello orchestrated the death of the assassination of John Kennedy. And of course, as we all know, because I want to just mention that right now, because we're going to go ahead and show parallels as to how he orchestrated that death with the same ones regarding Dorothy Kilgallen by using a patsy. And the patsy, of course, with the JFK assassination was Lee Harvey Oswald, and then even Jack Ruby. So I wrote that book, The Poison Patriarch, and then I learned about Dorothy Kilgallen. Now, a lot of your people that are watching may not even know who that woman is, but she was an amazing pioneer for women. She was a college dropout in the 1940s and 50s. She decided she wanted to be a journalist. Her father was a distinguished journalist at the New York Journal American, and she coaxed him in to letting her be an intern. Right away, she faced, and this is where she's an inspiration for women today, she faced gender discrimination and sexual discrimination. They wouldn't let her write certain articles. I have in the new book, for instance, an account of one time she wrote an article about a criminal trial, and they wouldn't accept it. The editor, they wouldn't accept it. They wouldn't accept. She had to write it 10 times before they finally accepted it. So she had to overcome all of that. But Dorothy was a woman who finally got her say, and she was able. In fact, they wouldn't let her uh, cover the Charles Lindbergh baby kidnapping case. But the big case for her then was the Dr. Sam Shepard case, which you may remember. He was alleged to have killed his pregnant wife, and she was able to cover that trial. There's actually a photograph of her on the Dorothy Kilgallen story.org. No, I think we have it in here. We'll show it in just a minute, where all the reporters are standing at the middle of that courtroom, and they're so enamored with Dorothy. And it was most interesting because to show the kind of woman she was, that she could be trusted, and why she had the best sources during that trial, as people will read in the new book, the judge, and this happened to her for every trial she went to, was enamored with her and asked her to come in and talk to him just before the trial. And he said to Dorothy, "Why are you here? This is not a big time case." And she said, "Well, wait a minute. It has a celebrity doctor. It has a murder. It has this, has that." And this judge said to her, "Well, I don't know why you're here, because he's guilty as hell." So she could have gone ahead but he had confided in her about that, trusted her with that information, and told her not that she shouldn't publish it. So she didn't. And it only was about a year ago, when the judge died, that the judge died, when she could go ahead and be able to do something with it. And she told Dr. Sam Shepard's attorney, F. Lee Bailey, who I also worked with in the 1980s and 90s and 2000, that about what the judge said. And that particular expose that Bailey used in an appeal for the Supreme Court led to the conviction of Dr. Sam Shepard being overturned. So that was the kind of woman that Dorothy Kilgallen was. So I'd written the Reporter Who Knew Too Much. Then just quickly, I wrote Denial of Justice because I found out about the Ruby trial transcripts, and that that at trial that Jack Ruby at his trial had said, before he shot to Lee Harvey Oswald, "I will be there." So that really titillated Dorothy, knowing that this whole thing about Oswald alone didn't make sense to her at all. So I wrote that book, and then you mentioned Collateral Damage, where I connected the deaths of Dorothy Kilgallen, Marilyn Monroe, with JFK and Robert Kennedy, and then Fighting for Justice, where I showed the corruption at the Warren Commission. Now, what is the linchpin to all of these? Of course, Dorothy is the linchpin to the 3 deaths and everything. But earlier this year, you mentioned the JFK assassination records release. And I was excited with that because the president said we're going to get all of them. Finally, we're going to get all of them, right? Well, we never have, by the way. But anyway, I started looking through them. I was trying to find Carlos Marcello's name. I was trying to find Dorothy Kilgallen's name, information about Robert Kennedy's death, all of that. And I couldn't find them. After I had done that and was kind of disappointed, then I was able to find a document, which I believe is the most important document about the JFK assassination in history, and one that really is the tell-all with regard to connecting these three deaths: JFK, Dorothy Kilgallen, and Marilyn Monroe. Internet Archives, which is a good reference source along with National Archives, I found, though, that there were 14 boxes of assassination records that had not been released. And in fact, I found an account where I think the woman's name is Gabbard, who's one of the big shots with the president, said in a cabinet meeting, you know what? Those 14 boxes are on the floor of my office. And I thought, well, that's surely good to save those. But the records were really redacted. There wasn't a lot of information in there except for the fact, and this is where this task force on government secrets and everything got waylaid, except for it showing CIA dirty tricks, which we already knew for years that had happened. So there was nothing new in there. But I found this document, and it was a FBI situation where when Marcello went to prison in the mid 1980s, there's the books right there, and people, when they read the new book, they'll see those. And we'll talk about Dorothy in just a second, but I want to go ahead and get this important document into our discussion because it changes everything about the assassination investigations and so on and so forth. And unfortunately, it's been hidden by this new task force. But what is this all about? There was a sting operation. Marcello got convicted in Louisiana for going ahead and bribing some county commissioners of all things. I mean, here's this powerful New Orleans Don, a multi-million-dollar empire stretching onto Dallas, and for whatever reason, he'd never been convicted of anything. And then he gets caught up in this situation where he's charged with bribing these people. It was called it was an investigation, and he was convicted. And they sent him to prison. I'm not sure exactly what the prison term was. I think it was 7 or 8 years or something. But anyway, he's sent to a prison in Texas. And I've never been able to quite figure out why that happened. In Texarkana, Texas, he went there. So the FBI then decided, let's do a sting because we really still believe that Carlos Marcello had the strongest motive to have killed JFK. And we want to go ahead and get evidence about that. So they put a stooge in the prison. Jack Van Lanningham, as you can see at the top of this, was the person. And it's so interesting because this man was one of the worst bank robbers that ever lived. He tried to rob a bank using a pillow sheet, and within it, he put some things in there and to make it look like it was fat. And then he went ahead and told the people at the bank that there was a bomb in there. Well, he got convicted, and they sent him to that prison. And what I found out, as you can see in here, is that on December 15th, 1985, Jack Ronald Van Lanningham was in the company of Carlos Marcello and another inmate at the Federal Correctional Institute in Texarkana, Texas. And here's what he said. Because the FBI putting in there as a stooge, they gave him a transistor radio. It had a recorder in it. They were actually able, because he became friends with Marcello, to be a cellmate. And what he said is, in the courtyard, engaged in conversation, Carlos Marcello discussed his intense dislike of former President John F. Kennedy, as he often did. Unlike other such tirades against Kennedy, however, on this occasion, Carlos Marcello said, referring to President Kennedy, yeah, I had the son of a bitch killed. I'm glad I did. I'm sorry I couldn't have done it myself. Yeah, I had the son of a bitch killed. I'm glad I did. I'm sorry I couldn't have done it myself. Now, all of this speculation through the years, William, the CIA was involved, the Cubans, the Russians, LBJ, everything. Here is a corroborated statement that I have in the book that people can read about. You can read and then look at the evidence that I've uncovered that shows this is the most credible possible document indicating that that Marcello confessed to orchestrating JFK's death. Now, also, they audio recorded that document, and I have done that conversation. And so I have done everything I possibly can to find that audio tape. This task force on the exposing of government secrets, headed by Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna of Florida, with Jefferson Morley, who is a guy obsessed with the CIA and the Oswald alone stuff and all of that. They have been given my research with regard to all of this, and they will not expose it in the either Morley's JFK Facts organization or in the expose that they were giving to the public. So what happened really is that this has been covered up for a lot of years, and it changes everything. And I want to go into that again later if we may. So Dorothy Kilgallen, let's just talk about her again. She ends up being, and ask any questions you want to, William, but she ends up being a very close friend of JFK's. He goes to her home on East 68th Street, and is playing cards with her, charades, all of that. That's been documented in my other books, and I'm not sure who that is.
That's Van Lanningham right there.
Oh, I had no idea
That's
there
him.
was a photograph of him.
Yeah, that's him.
Where did you find that? I feel
It's
like
on
a dummy.
YouTube. It's on YouTube.
Oh my gosh! Well, I've got to get that.
You want to hear him talk? I can bring it up. Let me see if I can bring it up.
Just a bit, if you would.
Sure.
Oh my gosh! I feel like a fool.
Got to always check YouTube. That's it. Let me think. Sure.
I guess so.
Sure.
And he talks about this?
Yeah, he's right here. Here we go. Let's see. Can you hear this?
His story, a secret, until...
Are you hearing that audio?
Yeah, I can hear it.
now.
What brought me into Texas penitentiary is that I was convicted of bank robbery, and I was sentenced to 8 years. When I got to the penitentiary, I wouldn't have known a mafia from a 5-cent cigar. He was dressed in the most beautiful tailored shirt, and his shoes were Gucci. Prison issue. He had pure white silver hair.
Over months, Jack Van Lanningham and Carlos Marcello, the oldest inmates in Texarkana, become friends. According to Jack, the camaraderie attracts the attention of prison staff, and he's summoned to a secret meeting with an FBI agent.
He said, "Jack, I'm in a position to make you an offer.
Yeah.
If you can get information that we need, you'll walk out of here a free man." I said, "Tell me something. Do I have any real choice in this or don't I?" He says, "No, you don't." He says, "You haven't got no choice."
It's real. That verifies it. I'll send you the link. You can watch it later.
Okay, if you don't mind. And
Yeah.
I'm happy to see it. I feel
Well, the other problem is YouTube gets really upset if you use somebody else's copyright stuff. So
yeah,
I'll get
if
like
I can
a
get that
strike.
from you, I would be
I'll
glad
get a
to.
strike. I'm happy to.
I'm just thinking, by the way, that in my books, from Dorothy Kilgallen's "The Reporter Knew Too Much" to the other ones, I've always said that Marcello had the greatest motive to have killed JFK. And this really, in some ways, I must pat myself on the back because this validates my research over the years.
Yeah, you said it in other interviews, Mark. You've mentioned Marcello almost every time.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And here, is that document. Now I want to go ahead to the audio tape.
I'm looking through my files. I don't see the audio tape. Is it on a YouTube?
I'll tell you why you don't. No. This is gold. All right. This is a videotape. But what happened to the audio tape is that the original audio tape of the document, of what happened with the confession, is that this was a sting, and there ended up being a lawsuit in the Texas courts where all of this was part of the evidence in a case that they were looking at that had Marcello involved. It's been tied up in that and sealed by the judge. So nobody has ever been able to get it. Now, get this. I made it clear to Congresswoman Luna and Jefferson Morley, find that audio tape because of all the power that they have with this task force and everything. Do you think they have even tried to go after it? As far as I know, they have not, because they do not want that information to be exposed to the American public. Now, I'm going to be very interested to watch this video, and I thank you, William, for this.
Yeah.
And again, I'm a little reticent that I couldn't find it.
I'll put a
So
link
back
up
to
in
Dorothy.
there.
Back to Dorothy Kilgallen. She believed she was a friend of JFK's from social things. Jackie came too, and it's most interesting because she lived at 45 East 68th Street in Manhattan, and this is where she did all her work. She had a column syndicated to 200 newspapers across the country, sometimes about Broadway, sometimes about crime stories. She had a radio program listened to a million people a day. She was on a program called What's My Line, which was a quiz show on CBS every Sunday night, and she was the star performer of that. In fact, most recently, people can watch 80 episodes of that program up on Prime Video now. So Dorothy was the real thing. And the kicker to getting her interested in JFK's death, though, was taking her son, Kerry, to the White House, where JFK made a big fuss over him about the letters he had brought from his third grade class. And in fact, when JFK died and she cried her eyes out, she wrote about that. What I remember is a tall man stooping over a little boy, praising him for the letters he brought from the third grade class. And JFK gave her a PT 109 pin and all of that. So when Dorothy went to Dallas and everything, she was going to obviously go ahead and really get into JFK's death. But let's just stop for a minute and look at the next one you have there, Girl Around the World. The look at the book. People always want to know when I talk to them about this, and it's really explained in the books, but especially in the new one, Abuse of Power. Where did Dorothy Kilgallen get her courage and to go forward and call out Sinatra, for instance, for dating a bunch of bimbos? Where did she get the courage, as we will see, to stand up against FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover and Carlos Marcello with articles she wrote and so on and so forth? It happened here. And this is called Race Around the World. It's a book that she wrote about the fact that in 1936, when she was 23 years old, there was what they called the race around the world. Now, it may not sound like much today, but the deal was that two male reporters much older than her, and Dorothy then joined the competition, were to race around the world using only commercial transportation, buses, trains, subways, all of those kinds of transportation, ships, and also then kind of primitive at that time, air travel. So she volunteered for that and became interested and went ahead and she competed in that. The first thing they did, by the way, was take the Hindenburg from New York City over to London and Paris, and then you just keep going around all the way into the Far East, back around to Hawaii, and then back to the United States to New York City. She competed in that race, and people can read in a couple excerpts in the new book about what she encountered, especially one in Indochina where she was in a small plane that had to land, and all of these natives were around with spears and things like that. So it's a fascinating read. I am happy to say that I was able to get a copy of that book, Girl Around the World, and I'm able, with the permission of the copyright holder, to publish that book sometime after the first of the year. And I think people will be enamored, especially with her writing. She makes you feel, she's one of the greatest wordsmiths who ever lived. I mean, Ernest Hemingway said she was the greatest woman writer in the world at the time.
Wow.
And I think people will be fascinated that. So let's go on, if we may.
But it is interesting. She was well known. She was well networked. She knew Sinatra. She knew JFK. She knew Hemingway. She was in salons in Georgetown.
Right.
She was very powerful. Like you wrote in the book, like this was one of the most, so like she was like what they would call an influencer today or something like that. Somebody whose words so many people read. 200,000 people reading your articles back in those days is a lot.
Well, I'm gonna stop here if I may, because we're going to talk about when Dorothy Kilgallen died, and the verdict was that she overdosed on drugs, circumstances undetermined or whatever. And when I first started out to look at writing a book about her, I couldn't find any information about her at all. And my wife and I actually went back to, who's helped me a great deal with all of my books and everything. We went back to New York City, went to New York City Library, went to the Lincoln Center. We looked at the National Archives, everywhere else trying to find information. We couldn't find any. So fortunately, I'll pat on myself on the back a little bit, because after we wrote The Reporter Who Knew Too Much and published it, Dorothy kind of came back to life a little bit, so to speak, for people. So I want to tell you about
One thing, Mark, before I forget, on the bottom right-hand side of your screen, you'll see
yes,
a
I
little
see
red
now.
flag. That's the link to the Van Landingham video. So save that for later.
All right, certainly will.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Again,
Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
can't believe I didn't find this. So about a month ago or more, I got a text from a New York City councilman. He and I had tried to get an investigation of Dorothy Kilgallen's death with the DA, Alvin Bragg. They said they were going to go through with this and the NYPD and everything, and they never did. And so he and I both felt bad. But at the time, he told me, you know what I'm going to try to do, Mark, at some point? I'm going to try to get a street co-named for Dorothy Kilgallen, because she deserves that. So he got a hold of me and told me that, and I was just ecstatic. On November 8th of this year, the 60th anniversary of Dorothy Kilgallen's death, my wife and I flew back to New York City. I would have crawled back if I could, because I have some health issues, but I went back there, and there was a ceremony at the corner of East 68th Street and Park Avenue. And people can read about this in an article by Sue Edelman of the New York Post, and watch some videos on YouTube, because I spoke, the city councilman spoke. We stood in front of 45 East 68th Street, because that's where Dorothy wrote all of her columns. She got ready for What's My Line and all that. And it's co-named Dorothy Kilgallen Way. And I'll just show this, because this was the flyer they put out. You can see that right there, the co-signing street, co-naming is right at the top of that street. And I just want to read just very quickly. Yeah, here you go. I want to just read what was said at that ceremony. Join us as we honor the extraordinary legacy of Dorothy Kilgallen, pioneering journalist, author, and fearless voice for truth. Dorothy's groundbreaking career in print and television broke barriers for women in media, and her commitment to investigative reporting made a lasting impact on American journalism. They also had a program for that ceremony, and in there it said something that I had really not thought about a great deal, that she was the pioneer in going ahead and being involved in print media, in television, and in print, television, and what's the third one then?
Columnist or investigative journalist. She really was an investigative journalist.
Yeah, print and all that. And that has
Hold on
been
just
a
one sec,
forerunner of
Mark.
what there is today.
Mark,
yeah.
Mark, does that guy on the far right look familiar to you in that picture?
That guy with the funny hat?
That guy right over there with the placard with the ribbon on it.
Yeah, and I was just ecstatic. There's the sign that went up. They had a ceremony, and the sign went up and everything. And so it was just a very, very special time for me. And thank you for putting that up.
Yeah,
there.
and that's Godfather actor Gianni Russo holding Dorothy Kilgallen waist. I'm gonna hold on.
Robert Holden.
I'm gonna read the. Hold on. I'm gonna read the subtext here. Godfather actor Gianni Russo holding Dorothy Kilgallen waist sign. To Robert Holden's right, author Mark Shaw holding proclamation. At far left is Frank Morano, council member from Staten Island and longtime radio host, who called Kilgallen a trailblazing reporter.
Exactly. So it's one of the highlights of my life. My wife was right there with me. We celebrated, and it was just terrific. And I knew, and I told him then, Dorothy was smiling, because she didn't get an awful lot of recognition when she was alive. But that now people who go to New York City, I believe they may go to that intersection and they look up there and it says Dorothy Kilgallen Way. They're going to wonder who the hell is that, but they probably will go right to their smartphone and try to figure it out. So hopefully an awful lot of more people will know about that, especially young women who should be so inspired with Dorothy's career.
She was kind of the first feminist. You wrote that. Like she was kind of like a real trailblazer in a male dominated career too.
Oh, absolutely. And you know, that courage that she showed during the race around the world stayed with her. And now we're going to find out how she goes ahead and looks at the JFK assassination. All right. And that is going to show even more of this courage that she exhibited with the race around the world. So let's go to that if we may. Okay, so that's the photo that's on the DorothyKilgallenStory.org and in this book. This is standing in the courtroom, middle of the courtroom, at the Dr. Sam Shepard case, and just look at the images on the faces of all of these reporters. Some of them are very famous, and they're just such admiration for her, and I think that really shows. That's why she had the best sources. That's why she had people trust her with information, as you will read in just a little, as people will read in the new book, especially about people like Jack Ruby and so on and so forth. So let's keep going if we may. All right, there's the sign. We had that, so let's keep moving. All right, so now we're getting to the time when JFK is assassinated. And obviously she was just unbelievably distressed, cried, all of that. Her son Kerry was with her. And now she decides in her mind, okay, I'm going to look into this. And what does she do? Unlike all of these so-called experts, William, who have written these books about the JFK assassination, including me, we were not there. Dorothy Kilgallen was. And the first thing that she did was she interviewed Jesse Curry, who was the Dallas police chief. And this is a book that I found that he wrote about the JFK assassination. It's a very rare book and ignored by most JFK assassination experts. And so she found out from Jess Curry, where did the shots come from? From the front, not from the back, from the front, the grassy knoll or the overpass or whatever. So she's very suspicious now about that. She learns about the whole situation with Oswald and could it be Oswald alone? And she didn't buy that. And she wrote a column called The Oswald File Must Not Close. And I think that comes up in a minute. But in the meantime, here is this Carlos Marcello being deported in 1961. And that's him at the headquarters of the immigration in New Orleans. And we go to the next one then. And this is the enemy within. And then here is the captured photo of JFK just before the shots are fired. And then we move on because Dorothy goes there. And what happens to her? Just keep going. Go back a minute. Go back a minute, please, to Jack Ruby. So what? Yeah, keep going. Okay, just a minute. Okay, now Jack Ruby shooting Oswald. All right. So what happens after Jack Ruby is arrested for killing Lee Harvey Oswald? Dorothy Kilgallen interviews the best sources she can, and one of them is a Dallas detective. I can't think of his name right now, but Dallas detective who was put in charge of Jack Ruby minutes after he shot Lee Harvey Oswald. And people can go into YouTube and they can see this. It was live on television and all of that. So she went. She found Archer was the detective's name, and he was with Jack Ruby. Jack Ruby was very nervous. He didn't smoke, and yet he smoked. He was running around. He had sweat on his face and everything. But she found out from that detective that the moment that Jack Ruby found out Lee Harvey Oswald was dead, he was calm as could be because he knew he had done what he was supposed to have done, and that is kill Lee Harvey Oswald. And we're going to go back to this again when we look at Sirhan and when he was arrested and what happened. So she found out all that. She didn't believe the Oswald alone, conclusion and everything. And she wrote Oswald File Must Not Close. Justice is a big rug. We can look at that if we may. this up a little bit. Justice is a big rug. When you pull it out from under one man, a lot of others fall too. Now, what's she doing? She's starting to put a target on her back. Because you had J. Edgar Hoover, the moment that JFK died, what did he do? He went ahead and shouted, Oswald, Oswald, Oswald alone to the world. Why did he do that? People have asked me. Because he did not want in any way, and we'll talk about his influence on the Warren Commission, he did not want anybody looking at a plot to kill the president, because if there was one, then he and the FBI could be held responsible for that. So what did he do? He put out that communique of Oswald alone, and then the FBI agent at his order stole JFK's body. It should have been autopsied at the Parkland Hospital. They shipped it off to New York City, where the autopsy was done. And Dr. Cyril Weck, who became a very good colleague of mine for my books, the best forensic scientist who ever lived, told me the autopsy in New York City or in Washington, D.C. by the military was the worst one he had seen in 60,000 autopsies. Because what they did is they came up with a conclusion that would verify what J. Edgar Hoover was saying. So Dorothy Kilgallen wrote that, and then this next quote from a newspaper column, you can just imagine the effect it had on those people who were watching every move, including, I believe, Marcello, J. Edgar Hoover, and so forth. Here's what she wrote. They've killed the president. The government is not prepared to tell the truth. And I'm going to do everything in my power to find out what really happened. Well, you can just imagine that obviously she's become the enemy of any of these people who were involved in the JFK assassination. So then we move ahead. What does she do? She goes ahead and she interviews Jack Ruby at his trial. The only one, no, let's go back and wait, okay? We go back to, she interviews Jack Ruby at his trial. How did she end up with the only interview out of 400 reporters at that trial? Because as I found in my research, and people will be most interested because it's a bit more conclusive than I'll be able to say here, Jack Ruby at his Carousel Club played What's My Line on the television every Sunday night. And he became a real admirer of Dorothy. So when the trial is being held, and the judge asks for an autograph and everything because she's so famous, she walks up to the railing and she asks the co-counsel for Jack Ruby and that if she can interview Ruby. And he says, absolutely not. But Ruby overturns that, and she interviews Jack Ruby 3 times at that trial. Now, we don't know exactly what he told Dorothy, because the moment that Dorothy Kilgallen died, as we will talk about under very unusual circumstances, a staged death scene and so on and so forth, there's an FBI raid, or it's a Marcello raid. We're not sure which one, or a combination of both of those, because they not only stole all of her JFK assassination records, but also the manuscript for a tell-all book she was writing for Random House.
Wow.
But we can go ahead and figure out what he told her, because where did he send her? He didn't send her to look into the Cubans, the Russians, LBJ, the industrial complex, the CIA, whatever it was. He sent her to New Orleans. And Dorothy Kilgallen then went to New Orleans. She started doing her interviewing. She went to Pete Marcello's bar, that's Carlos's a brother. And she started interviewing people. And she took with her a hairdresser named Mark Sinclair, as people will find out in the new book. And what happened there? She said, we're going to take separate plane rides to New Orleans. And then after she had done a little bit of research, she called him at the hotel and said, you go back to New York City. Don't tell anybody you were here with me, and don't ask any more questions. And then she made a big mistake, just as Marilyn Monroe made right before her death, when word got out to the Kennedys that she was going to the media with all of some of the security material that Jack Kennedy, who dumped Marilyn Monroe after a love affair, and Bobby Kennedy, who, as I have proven through a CIA document, had a torrid love affair with her. They found out that she was going to go to the media with all of the national security secrets, and obviously they could not let that happen. And in the new book, I go ahead and recapitulate what I have in collateral damage to show exactly how Marilyn Monroe was set up for the kill and who was responsible, none other than Robert F. Kennedy. So now Dorothy goes back to New York City, and what does she do? She's a blabbermouth like Marilyn was. If the wrong people knew what I know about the assassination would cost me my life, she tells one hairdresser. The other one to her says, I'm afraid for my life and my family. I bought a gun. I've gotten death threats and all of that. And so she knew she was in danger. But because of what she went ahead and said she was going to do with this tell-all book for Random House, I have proven in the new book, with even more evidence than before, that just as there was a patsy in the JFK assassination, there was one with Dorothy Kilgallen's death, and that man was named Ron Pataki. He was a Midwestern journalist, much younger than Dorothy. She was estranged from her husband Richard, who was an alcoholic and destitute with regard to having any money whatsoever, and was playing around and all that. And this Pataki kind of latched on to Dorothy to try to get ahead and maybe become a journalist in New York City, whatever. And unfortunately, Dorothy made another mistake, because during her time with him, she shared some of her JFK assassination evidence. She showed him some of it, some of the pages of the manuscript and all of that. And she should have never done that, because what happened was that I believe Marcello, who could not let, and Hoover too, could not let Dorothy write that book, because it obviously would have incriminated Marcello for orchestrating JFK's death and J. Edgar Hoover for covering it up. They compromised Ron Pataki. He had gambling debts. He wanted to be a big shot. And so they compromised him into going ahead and setting up, as I've proven in the new book and before, and even more in the new book, he set her up for the kill. And how do we know all this happened? Because the night before she died, or the night she died, well, it was a few hours before, they met at a hotel near where she lived on East 68th Street, and she confronted him with leaking her material to people that should not have known about this. And I believe she leaked that to some of the wrong people, including Marcello's people and all of that. And they got in a big argument with that. But she permitted him to walk her home. And as I've proven in the books, Ron Pataki is the one who had barbiturates ready to ingest into her, drop into her a vodka and tonic drink, because he could not let her go ahead and expose the fact that he had been leaking that material. So how do we know that Pataki was the one who orchestrated that death? Because I found this particular poem on his website, and I hope that the readers will agree. As a former criminal defense lawyer, always looking at motive and always looking at what a suspect would have said, he wrote this poem: vodka roulette seen as relief possibility. While I'm spilling my guts, she is driving me nuts. Please fetch me 2 drinks on the run. Just let's see, it says, just skip all the noise
Noisen.
and make one of them poison, and don't tell me which one. That is information that only the killer of Dorothy Kilgallen could have known. And how do we know that? Because in the new book, people are going to be fascinated with new interviews I have with 4 people associated with the New York Medical Examiner's Office. And one of those people also there was a guy named Dr. Charles Umberger. When the autopsy for Dorothy came out, it was just as phony as the one for JFK's assassination, because what they did is they went ahead and did a very, very bogus autopsy. They concluded that Dorothy Kilgallen had died of an overdose of drugs, circumstances undetermined, because one of the detectives, who was a new detective who came to the home of Dorothy, saw an empty Seconal bottle by her bed, and we should go. And he said, well, this was another celebrity who took her life or overdosed on drugs. And we should set that up as far as what it looked like when that detective got there. Mark Sinclair, the hairdresser, found her in a bedroom she never slept in, wearing her eyelashes, makeup, and hairpiece, wearing clothes she never wore to bed. There was an air conditioner on, even though it was freezing outside. And there was a book on her lap, upside down, she had already read. He was so upset with regard to what happened, and people will read his account in the new book as to what he found, that he cried for sure and was very upset and so on and so forth. And yet the official verdict of Dorothy was this overdose of drugs, circumstances undetermined. And in the new book, you will see that they will see, the readers, that I have interviewed these new people. And the connection there that I now have more than anything else is proving that the medical examiner's office was controlled by the mafia. And I believe it was Carlos Marcello who was involved with that. And they did a new look at Dorothy's bodily,
Stomach
her
contents or whatever.
contents and everything 2 years later. And a forensic scientist found that there was not just one barbiturate in her system, Tulinol, but there was not Seconal, but Tulinol and also phenobarbital. So she obviously was poisoned. And one of the new pieces of evidence in this book, which has been enlarged from the other ones, is that there were remnants of the Tulinol on one of the glasses that was right next to Dorothy's bed. So what Pataki did so that he wouldn't be exposed for going ahead and he went ahead and orchestrated Dorothy's death, and then he emptied those capsules, put them into her vodka and tonic drink, and so on and so forth. So we've tied that up now with two patsies, one used in Jack Kennedy's death and one used in Dorothy Kilgallen's death. And we move on now, I think, if we may, to the next slide, which has to do with, we're going to get into Robert Kennedy. So Carlos Marcello wants to kill that SOB, Bobby Kennedy, when he ships him off to Central America, right? But he can't, because he knows Jack Kennedy will come after him. But now what happens as we get close to 1968, Marcello's empire, and I've proven that in the new book that readers will find out, that his empire, which was a multi-million-dollar empire in 1963, has grown to a billion-dollar empire. He's even into shipping narcotics from South America. The empire is something he cannot risk losing. And he finds out that who's going to run for president in 1968? None other than Robert Kennedy. Well, he can't let that happen, because he knows, and I've proven in there through some sources, that the first thing that Robert Kennedy was going to do when he became president of the United States is what? Go after Marcello. So the challenge for me then, if I believe that he was the one who orchestrated Robert Kennedy, is to go ahead and figure out how I might show that occurred. And I've got to do some thinking, because I was looking at the National Archives and Internet Archives and so on and so forth, trying to find information about this man, Sirhan, who supposedly, like Oswald, was the lone person who killed Robert Kennedy. Well, it's amazing how these things happen. And I hope that people that watch this video will do the same thing that others have done who have read the book and so on and so forth. They get in touch with me through markshawbooks.com, and they give me tips. And I'm able to find information that I would never have been able to use in my books at all. In this particular situation, though, I was just combing through the internet and trying to see what I might find about Robert Kennedy's death. And all at once, I had an aha moment. And this particular video, we can move down, because here we have, well, just a second. Here we have Robert Kennedy getting ready to go ahead and give his speech, his acceptance speech, after he won the California primary at the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles. And that will come into play in a minute. And he's ready to do that. And then what happens? If you go ahead. He is shot. All right. So now here's Sirhan. And I want to point out how I got to figuring out more information about Sirhan. So I'm looking at the internet and trying to figure out what I can find out, and I come across a video, which is in the book. The link is into the book. And what does it show me? There was a gentleman who was a paddock captain at Santa Anita Racetrack south of Los Angeles named John Shear. And it's an account of his life and times because John Shear was a hero at Santa Anita Park. Here's what he did. He was a paddock captain, and one day while he was down in the paddock area, and the horses are, taken care of there, and he noticed that one of the horses was starting to go wild and gallop and everything else, and he's noticed across from the horse was a little young girl who ended up being 5 years old, and the horse is headed right for the little girl, who obviously the horse would have stomped to death. John Shear got in the middle of the horse and the little girl and saved her life. He broke every bone in his body, and it took almost a year for him to get back to working at Santa Anita. So you talk about a hero, you talk about a credible source, because what this video shows then is just before, within about a year of JFK's death. Oh, there's John Shear right there. Thank you. And there's the area where this all happened, and what he did. There we go. He saved the little girl. I don't know if we see her, but that's what he did. The bravest man you could find. Thank you for showing that. So that happens. So then we move on, and he's there, and then all at once he sees a young man at his barn there at the racetrack, and the man walks up and said, "I need a job." And John Shear, as readers will find out, because there he is being rehabilitated. They will find out that John Shear looks at this young man and says, "All right, what can I do for you?" And the young man says, "I need a job." And Shear says, "The only thing we have is a hot walker, and that is walking the horses around. It pays $200 a month," which was not much money at the time, okay? And the guy says, "I'll take it." That man was Sirhan. I prove it. And that's what John Shear says. So we move ahead then, because he works at Santa Anita Park. John Shear says he's easily manipulated. He's a quiet man. I mean, he's just a man who you wouldn't ever think would cause any violence or whatever. But at one point, he does show displeasure with Robert Kennedy, because he's a Palestinian, and Robert Kennedy is if he becomes president, he may send jets to the Israelis and stuff like that. And that will come into play when he's chosen as the patsy to go ahead and be involved in the night that Robert Kennedy dies. So there's the eyewitness account by him. And then we move ahead, if we may. One night, by the way, I get my best ideas in the middle of the night. You can go on down to the Mickey Cohen photograph. I get my best ideas in the middle of the night.
I'll be right back, Mark. I'll be right back.
Oh, okay.
Keep talking.
So my best ideas come at the middle of the night, around 3 a.m. I think the good Lord wakes me up, and I now use a smartphone, notes on smartphones, on the smartphone, because my wife talked me into getting one. But at that time, what I was doing was just sketching out things. And this may be hard to read here, but in the book, it's very easy to read. And basically what I did was showing the footprint of Carlos Marcello on all of the three deaths, including Robert Kennedy. And, I wanted to do that to be able to connect those in. But to connect those in, I needed somebody in Southern California who could have influenced, to use that word, influenced Sirhan some way or another to become the patsy when Robert Kennedy is dead. And that man is this guy, Mickey Cohen. Now, you may recall he was the main client of Melvin Belli, who represented Jack Ruby, who had the mafia connection. In fact, Belli used to go to Las Vegas and hang out with those guys. And he hung out, of course, with Mickey Cohen. So I looked into Mickey Cohen to figure out exactly how he played into this. And you can go on down now, if you would. And in the book, by the way, I put all the connections in that people can read about the connections that Marcello had to the different players, I would call them, with regard to the JFK, Dorothy Kilgallen, and Robert Kennedy assassinations. So let's just stop there for a minute, then we'll get into the summation that I put in here. So what do? All right. I think about Mickey Cohen, all right. And I find out, of course, that he was a very close friend of Marcello's. And he controlled the racetracks, all the racketeering in Southern California, but he also controlled the racetracks. And one of those was Santa Anita Racetrack. And I found out that Sirhan had gambling debts, that he owed money to a lot of people. So that makes him susceptible to being used, if you will. So now we get very close to when Robert Kennedy is killed. And John Shear talks about the fact that one time there, he and his wife went to Hollywood Park, which was very close to the racetrack at Santa Anita, and they see Sirhan walking up some stairs. He's got a brand new suit on, looks like he has money, and right beside him are these two men, which John Shear called hoodlums. And he believed he remembered them because they had gotten thrown out of Santa Anita Racetrack. My belief, and you don't have to stretch it too far, is that those were mafioso who were controlling Sirhan. And so then we get to they're very curious of that. Also, Sirhan had money. So he was unemployed. So it didn't make sense to John Shear. He wondered what happened. So then we get to Robert Kennedy, the day Robert Kennedy is killed. And on the Los Angeles television, they had a mugshot of Sirhan. Below it said, "Do you know this man?" And John Shear looks at himself. He said, "That's Saul." That's the nickname they had for Sirhan. And so his wife calls Hollywood Park Racetrack, asks for the security. John Shear then talks to them and believes then and tells his story and believes they will let the LAPD and the FBI know about the fact that he knows Sirhan, and they will then get in more of an investigation into that. Well, you're probably way ahead of me because they never contacted. Just like J. Edgar Hoover standing there at the JFK assassination and with Dorothy's death, he's not going to let there be any plot to kill Robert Kennedy. They never get a hold of John Shear. But one of the scary things that people will see in the video of John Shear is that he said for the next year, if you can imagine, the next year, every time they picked up the phone, there was a click. And they believed that obviously whoever was responsible for RFK's death was checking to see what they knew and so on and so forth that way. And that's just another a symbol of how the mafia handles things that way. So we have now that information from John Shear. And then I'm feeling like I've gone ahead with the patterns, I guess you'd call them, with the JFK assassination, with Dorothy's investigation and everything. And I'm not going to go through this completely, but it's a summation of my author proof regarding the Marilyn Monroe, JFK, Kilgallen, and Robert Kennedy's murders. Now, I want to make this point because this is the first book where I'm able to go ahead and put in context the three deaths and Marilyn's. Let's say Marilyn's too. 1962 for Marilyn, 63 for JFK, Dorothy Kilgallen, 65, and Robert Kennedy in 1968. Because I wrote in the new book, as Robert Kennedy is going ahead and giving his acceptance speech, has a big smile on his face. All of his supporters are there. Let's move on to Chicago and go to the convention. And it looks like he's going to be president of the United States. I said the long arm of Marcello reached out from New Orleans, some I better writing, reached out from New Orleans and took that smile off of his face, and then there was the face of a man who was killed, dead. So I've summarized in the book for people at the end, and what I hope is that they can look through that material and the material in the book and then say to themselves, don't look at these deaths individually. Look at them in context with the other ones, especially the use of a patsy, because the mafia never did their own work. they would never have taken a chance to that. So they want to go ahead and find somebody that they can use to appoint the investigations to, so they won't be investigated themselves. So that's where we are with this. Let's see what we have next. Oh yes, let's not forget this. Besides the evidence pointing to Sirhan being innocent, I want to talk about a letter that I sent to Robert Kennedy Jr. That was delivered on Monday. Are the ballistics?
Do you want me to bring that up? I can probably
No,
bring it up.
let's wait a minute, please.
Okay.
So let's talk about ballistics tests. If I am Sirhan, I'm standing in front of Robert Kennedy. And I have a gun, okay? He had a gun. How he got it, we don't know, but he was shooting around and everything. But he's in front of Robert Kennedy. And the bullets the wounds that killed Robert Kennedy come from the back, into the back and to the neck. And I have fresh ballistics information from an expert in the book showing how it would have been impossible for Sirhan to have shot what could have been the next president of the United States. And so that's just another factor into the fact that Sirhan is not accountable for Robert Kennedy's death. So what I did then with this is I was ecstatic when I found out that the president had convened the task force of, I think it's the task force of, where is it? Anyway, the task force that was going to look into classified, they were going to declassify secret government documents, okay? And they put Congresswoman Luna in charge. I have no idea why. She had no experience whatsoever. And their mission, she said, first of all, was to get rid of all the deceptions that had happened all the way through the years, going back to the Warren Commission, although the task force ends up being a copycat of the Warren Commission. You're going to get rid of all those deceptions, and we're going to bring the truth to the American public. I was so ecstatic with that I wrote her several letters telling her of my research that I just shared with you, the viewers, about Marcella's confession, about John Shear's account, about the Pataki involvement with Dorothy's death, the cause of death for Dorothy, all of my evidence in these letters, and said, I am a historian. I want to contribute my research to your investigation. And I made sure she got the letters. And I sent them actually to several members of the task force that way. Let me have a drink here. And I did that and made sure they got them because I wanted to contribute my research. And I said also, I know you're having these hearings.
Right. And you have some of the new documentation from what's been released 2025 in this new book, right?
Yes, absolutely. Although a lot of it was, about the CIA dirty tricks. There wasn't much about JFK's death, nothing about Robert Kennedy's death, nothing about Dorothy's, okay? But anyway, I sent this to her, made sure she got it, and went ahead then, a friend of mine, a colleague of mine, who was able to get me a quick telephone call with Congresswoman Luna. And I talked to her, Luna, on the day of the first hearing, when Jefferson Morley and Oliver Stone appeared. And anybody who wants to watch that on the internet will be absolutely amazed. First of all, Morley said Oswald never shot JFK. He went on into other things that made little sense as far as I'm concerned with regard to the assassination investigation. Oliver Stone went ahead and said that Oswald was never even in the book depository. Well, Jesse Curry, who was the chief of police, talks about in here, and it's excellent, and I've got it in the book. His recollections of what happened. He takes you all the way from the point that the president is shot, all the way through when Oswald is interrogated, and so on and so forth. And so that particular testimony at that hearing was just absolutely bogus. So I went ahead and I offered all this, and in the phone call with Luna, I told her what I wanted to do. I told her of the letters, and I gave her my evidence, and I said, I would like to appear at one of your hearings. And she said, I'm receptive to that. To this day, William, I have never heard from her or Morley. Never heard from them. Because here's what happens. And this is where I'm going to show the relevancy of the book for your viewers. What happens is, and it happens in all of the books, if people go look at the other books about the JFK assassination and Dorothy's death and everything, they're going to find these books that are Oswald Alone books or CIA involvement in the assassination books. You'll never find my research in there, because what happens is they cannot do that, because if they go ahead and include my evidence, then it's not going to make their evidence look very credible. The greatest example is Vincent Bugliosi, who is the famous prosecutor of Charles Manson. When I was doing my research, he was writing a book which became Reclaiming of History, which should have been named Distortions of History, because I talked to him, and I knew Vince from my days of practicing law in Los Angeles. And I called him and I said, you know, I have new information about Dorothy Kilgallen's death and JFK and all of that and everything. And I want to give that information to you, and I'll send it to you. And I did, so you can put it in your book. And he said, Mark, thank you so much. The next month, the book came out, or 2 months later, the book came out. He never included it, because you see, he can't do that, because he was an Oswald alone guy. And that's exactly what the task force has done. My alternatives to this, one of my good friends who's a member of actually JFK Facts, along with Jefferson Morley, who's become a media darling for some reason with all of his bogus information about things. It's very sad that he's done that. But anyway, said to me, you know what the task force was? It was political theater. The president of the United States, basically, and through the task force, it looks to me like, wanted to show people that they were going through the motions. I mean, all of those JFK assassination records, William, so many of them were redacted. We'll never know what happened with those, and we don't to this day. And they'll never release anymore. I'm told that the task force is done. They never looked into Robert Kennedy's death. They never looked into Martin Luther King's death and all of that. So disgusted with all of this happening, the one thing that came to mind to me for sure was that I wanted to look into how Robert Kennedy Jr. had handled the situation with Sirhan being the person who supposedly killed his father. So what I did is I found evidence of what Robert Kennedy Jr. said over the years. And it was absolutely amazing what I found, because he really talked about the fact that he didn't believe at any time at all that Robert Kennedy, or that Sirhan was responsible for Robert Kennedy's death. I've just got to find my note here. Anyway, there are certain things that he said through the years. I know my father would not be happy if the wrong person were convicted of his death. I went to we have an account where he went to Sirhan and met him in prison in 2017, where he hugged him, Sirhan, and said, I know that you're not accountable for my father's death. There are other accounts that are in the book that people can read, because he went ahead and really, he even went to this extent. When Robert Kennedy, I'm so sorry, when Sirhan was up for parole in 2021, he went ahead and told the parole board he should be paroled. All right, and advocated that happening. And actually, you may remember, Sirhan was paroled, okay, based on, I think, Robert Kennedy's desiring that to happen. So this is interesting, because then the governor of California, Gavin Newsom, had to get in the mix of things, because he wants to be president, I think, and he didn't want to be the one who released Sirhan, so he revoked the pardon for the parole for Sirhan. So I decided to see what I could do, because I knew that of all of his support for Sirhan, and I wrote a letter to Robert F. Kennedy Jr. that was delivered to him last Monday, and I also sent a copy to this past Monday, and I went ahead then and also copied it to Luna, Congresswoman Luna, so she would know what I was doing, and I asked him based on your support for this man, he should not spend one more day in prison. He deserves a new trial or a new investigation, or you know what you could do. And I think through the kindness of your heart for this 81-year-old man who has spent more than 60 years, almost 60 years in prison, go to your colleague or go to President Trump and ask him to pardon Sirhan. Now, I did that because, as you know, the president has been good at pardoning people, whoever they may be. And I asked him to use his influence. There's the letter right there. We can pull it up if you want.
Okay.
I won't be able to read it, but basically, this is what I said to him. And I gave him all the evidence. Okay, go down a bit. I gave all of the
This
evidence.
is the March 11th one. Is that the one
Oh,
you're
I'm
talking
sorry.
about?
That's to Luna. Excuse me. That's
Yeah.
to Luna.
Let's
Where's
see.
the one to Robert Kennedy? Do we have this in here?
I have the other one. I just have to bring it up.
Okay. So I put in there all the evidence, and I think there are about 25 items, which I told you about in this interview, that show that Sirhan was not accountable for Robert Kennedy's death. Now, what will happen? Will I ever hear from Robert Kennedy Jr.? I don't know. But I'm a person all about justice. Justice was not, there it is, did not prevail with John F. Kennedy's assassination, with Dorothy Kilgallen's death, and with this one. And you can go down, I put John Shear's account in here. There's some material about Sirhan, keep going. There's the video in there. And then here are all these reasons why Sirhan should be released from prison. I copied a bunch of people in highfalutin people in Washington, D.C., in the government, and so on and so forth, so that they would know what I was trying to do. And I'm hoping that I will hear from Robert F. Kennedy Jr., or even better than that all of a sudden, for whatever reason, the President of the United States will pardon this man who should not, as I said, spend one more day in jail. So that is my quest now. I'd like to get a new investigation for Dorothy's death, a new investigation independent of JFK's death. But for the time being, what I'm hoping to do is to have this crusade of mine make a difference with regard to Sirhan being released from prison. I don't know if it'll happen, but in my situation, you have to try. And William, I'm going to give it a shot, and I'm going to try to get some support from people who know Robert Kennedy Jr. I know that there's a couple people in D.C. who have his ear, and I'm going to hope that for some reason, at some point, he'll say to himself, I know he's got a lot of other things he's involved with as the health secretary or whatever he is, but I'm hoping that he will decide, I can't let an innocent man that I know is innocent, right? I know is innocent, continue to be in prison.
I think he said publicly on multiple occasions he doesn't believe that Sirhan did it. I mean, I don't think there's any question about it. He said it very recently. Yeah.
Okay, so you've said all that. Now live up to it. Okay, I've challenged him, is what I've done. Live up to it. And you are in a position of power where you can get Sirhan released from prison. Do it.
How many parole hearings do you think Sirhan's gone through? Isn't it every 6 years in California or something like that?
Something like that. But I'll tell you what's been disappointing. There have been several lawyers through the years, and I'm not going to mention them, okay, who they were. But mostly what they have tried to get him pardoned for is that he is old, all right, but also that he's rehabilitated, and also that he's old, and what problems could he cause if he was released, right? They never got into looking at the problems with the evidence. Oh, one more thing. Sirhan, when he was arrested, I hope this would never happen to you if you were arrested. They would give you the worst lawyers in the world, because the lawyers that Sirhan ended up being appointed to, and also that were retained by friends of his, supposedly, were connected to the mafia. Johnny Roselli was a mafia lawyer. And so
one
on,
got disbarred, if I remember correctly.
Exactly. Yeah. And he did. And then one of the lawyers actually stood up in the middle of the trial and said Sirhan was guilty. So this man had no fair representation whatsoever. And Robert F. Kennedy Jr. knows that as well. So come on. do the right thing here and get this man released.
He's also
How
been
about-
tinkered. He's been tinkered with. I don't know if you saw part of that story, but
Who's
he's
that?
not normal. Sirhan. He
Uh,
doesn't remember. He has amnesia.
oh,
He doesn't
no,
remember
no,
things.
no. He doesn't have not. I don't think the amnesia thing was right, but he was so confused. He
I
was
disagree
young.
with
He
you.
doesn't remember exactly what happened.
Yeah.
That is the case.
I differ than you. I think he has deliberate amnesia. I think when he recalls the event, he's being retold what really happened. I don't think he
He's never
remembers
recalled
anything.
the events.
Right. That's why that's
Go back to
amnesia.
go back to the
That's a
Ambassador Hotel.
definition of amnesia, but that's okay.
Go back to the Ambassador Hotel.
He's in front. The most important thing is that he's in front of RFK. There's like 12 bullets shot. Somebody asked that question here.
Yeah.
Let's see.
But what they should know is this. Guess who controlled the gambling at the Ambassador Hotel
Probably the
and
mob.
knew all about how it worked? Mickey Cohen.
Yeah, I'm not
See,
surprised.
it all fits together, I believe, with common sense, logic, no speculation, and so on and so forth that way. And I'll tell you what I said in the letter to Robert Kennedy Jr. I said, you and I may differ about who killed your father, okay? Because I believe Marcello had the greatest motive and everything. You've said at times you thought it was the CIA. It doesn't matter who we believe killed your father. What is most important is that Sirhan did not.
Right.
And I hope that will have some impact on him.
Do you know this, Mark? Bart asks, RFK was clutching a clip-on tie immediately following the shooting. Have you guys heard of this? I think he was, yeah. Did you know? I think he's pictured with the clip-on tie in his hand.
That may very well be true.
Yeah.
You know, one of the sad things in the book that I don't think has been publicized is what did Ethel Kennedy do after, Robert Kennedy was shot. And I've gotten a strong account. It's verified, where she just, started yelling and screaming at all the media to get away and get out of that. They've killed my husband and so on and so forth. The readers will see that in the new book. And that must have just been a terrifying experience for them because, he very well may have been the next president of the United States.
Well, he would, yeah. I mean, he basically won the nomination. Art of the personal story asks, how can we ask Trump to pardon Sirhan individually? This is a genuine question. I've always felt bad for him the more I've known.
How can we ask Trump to pardon Sirhan?
Yep.
Well, some people have said, there could be a problem because Sirhan did not supposedly commit a federal crime. But in this kind of situation, my argument to that was he didn't commit a crime at all. And so the president has the right to go ahead and pardon him. And I think Robert Kennedy Jr. can convince the president to do that. This question, has there any updates on the person in the polka dot dress? Wondering who that woman was. Here's the problem with the JFK assassination, Dorothy Kilgallen's assassination. In fact, I just go crazy with, if you don't mind me mentioning it, I just go crazy with these books about Marilyn, who speculate all the different theories about what happened to her. The latest one is by James Patterson, the famous novelist, which just came out, The Last Days of Marilyn Monroe. And on the cover he has, because I bought the book I wanted to see, it said a true crime thriller. Now we have 3 true crime murder mysteries, but that's different. He has a true crime thriller. So I'm thinking, yeah, I go back 3 or 4 pages by the copyright page, and it says, this is a work of fiction. This is a work of fiction. The names have been changed and so on and so forth. This drives me nuts, all of these distortions of history. And it's all because of speculation. Now, the woman in the polka dot dress, there's been a lot of conjecture about her. There's also a couple people, if I remember right, who were heard screaming as they went out of there saying, we got him, we got him. But just as with other evidence involved, you have to go through a lot of loops to be able to figure out why these people were involved in the Robert Kennedy assassination, Dorothy's death, and JFK. What I have proposed in my books, and readers can look at them and then send me emails and criticize me and everything if they want to, is that I have direct evidence. You don't have to go ahead and in JFK's death for sure to point to Marcello. You don't have to do that in Dorothy's death. And certainly, I believe now with my new research, you don't have to do that because, again, look at motive. That's the main thing that you need to consider, because usually when you find out who has the strongest motive to have go ahead and you can easily go ahead and show who was responsible. I want to, that comment was very interesting. I hate what? Rewriting history?
They're rewriting history like it's a mockumentary. Yeah, Patterson's kind of a hack writer, in my opinion. So
That's a great word, mockumentary. I might try to use that to impress people. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Yeah, and the relevance here. Let's just one more thing, if you don't mind, if we have time. The relevance of all this. These things happened 60 years ago. Come on, Shaw. Why does that make any difference with regard to things? I'll tell you why. Because people back then in the 1960s didn't ask questions about the 4 deaths, including Maryland's. They just took it for granted what the government told them. And the only one standing up and asking questions about the JFK assassination was dear Dorothy. And people have asked me, oh, Mark, why is she the most credible reporter about the JFK assassination? Well, I'll tell you why. They killed her. So the relevance here is that I really encourage people to ask questions. You can't trust the government, especially in this atmosphere now. Don't go ahead and not ask questions or argue or do whatever you need to do your own research about things. All right. We just I guess the government just went ahead and they're doing things now that I can't believe that we're about to have a war with Venezuela, for God's sakes. But if that bothers you, then do your own research and ask questions and so on and so forth. Vote. Do something. Just don't sit on your you know what and expect and accept what the government is telling you, because we need to learn from history, and that's exactly what happened with these 4 people dying in the 1960s.
Mark Girl Friday on Tuesday asked, was Darlene Farron or Farron the girl in the polka dot dress? Have you heard that?
I've heard that name used, but again, I don't believe that has been verified. There has been speculation with regard to it, and she very well may have been. But where's the motive from that particular person, that particular woman, to have set up or actually been involved in the assassination of Robert Kennedy? I've never seen that proof.
People try to get these patsies into place, I mean, if you look at Oswald, he was handled by like 10 different people, all getting him into Dallas. Like, it's incredible. DeMorenchilt and Payne and all these other people are like getting him into place, getting him ready. There was a guy who was a CIA asset from Dallas. Like, he's all over the place. Ferry, Marcello, Bannister. There's just so many names around Oswald. So these guys, like, there's other lesser players making sure these people are in the right place at the right
there
time.
are. I got a kick out of Jefferson Morley recently, who has said that the CIA, chased Oswald all around the world, Russia, everywhere else, and they followed him right before the JFK assassination and all of that. But there is no direct evidence that the CIA was involved in the JFK assassination. And when he was confronted by another famous podcaster recently, who basically said there's nothing new in the evidence from the JFK assassination records or anything that Morley has found, Morley said, well, but there are some new things. And besides, we're getting warmer all the time to figure out what happened. Those are his words. We're getting warmer. That's 2 years of investigation. So unfortunately, I just have difficulty with that because, yes, you're right. You know what? Here's something to think about. Did Dorothy Kilgallen ever investigate the CIA? Absolutely not. She never did, because she felt like it was a dead end. Did she ever investigate too much about Oswald? No. She concentrated on Jack Ruby. This is the smartest woman at the time, and so on and so forth. She just focused in. She was so smart with regard to that. And it was Ruby that she focused in on, because she thought he was the key to figuring out what really happened.
How did the mob get Oswald into place to become a patsy?
Oh, that's not the mob. That's Carlos Marcello. When you just say the mob, yeah.
Okay, how did Marcello get Oswald into place to be a patsy?
Using Joseph Campisi and Joseph Savillo, who were his thugs in Dallas who were able to go ahead and compromise Oswald, I believe. But there really is no complete explanation for anything to do with Oswald. All right. But if you think about it, what does Marcello have to do when he wants to orchestrate JFK? He has to go ahead and somehow or another get somebody to do the dirty work for him, and somehow that man ends up being Oswald. Now, I have an account that I'm proud of with a lower class, I would say, mobster in New Orleans in the new book. Frenchie is his name. And I found him through some research, and it was most interesting to find out that he knew Marcello very well. He did some work for Marcello and so on and so forth. People can read the book and read the book. They'll learn about this man and how he is a verifiable source. And he says at one point, I was working with Marcello, and one day I went into office, and guess who was sitting right there? Lee Harvey Oswald. And for a few days, I couldn't go anywhere without running into, and he used the F word, Lee Harvey Oswald. And there's some connection, what is it, with Oswald's uncle to Marcello. So obviously he knew about Marcello, or Marcello knew about him, and one way or another, you can go ahead and get a connection as to how Sirhan became a patsy. But I'm careful with that because I can't pin that down right before JFK was killed. I can pin down through a source that Marcello used a couple of gunmen from Europe, brought them into the United States through Canada, and they were the ones that actually were the ones who killed the President of the United States. But I can't, and I don't think anybody has really figure out, Oswald was just, everybody's tried to figure him out, but you just can't do that. But you can show exactly what happened with Jack Ruby.
Interesting.
Dorothy, who the Oswald could not have shot.
Diddy Muslim asked, did Dorothy credit the Israel connection with Dimona, nuclear weapons, etc., or did that only come out later? Did she ever make an Israeli connection?
I'm very sad, but I hate to say it, but I can't tell you that I know anything about that at all.
There's people in the JFK, they're either CIA done it, Jews done it, mob done it, LBJ done it. It's like I've been in the community for long enough to know.
Oh yes, absolutely.
Like everybody puts on a different hat.
So I'm sorry, I haven't done that research there. What was the next one? Because that sounded very interesting.
Well, it's Girl Friday on Tuesday. Says Campese's Egyptian restaurant is still on Elm Street in Dallas every day.
Yes, it is.
It's busy and open.
And I found, it's amazing how these things happen. I actually found, and it may still be up there, in the Denver Post. No, it was in the one of the Dallas newspapers. There is an interview with Joe Campese, who was a thug for Marcello, and had dinner with Jack Ruby the night before he killed Oswald, and that's in the new book. Campese nephew, they interview him about the fact, ask him about, was Jack Ruby in the restaurant the night before he killed Oswald? He says yes. And then he goes ahead and gives some circumstances as to how that happened. And I've also got in the new book some comparisons there with how that happened, but also that Egyptian restaurant is still there today. She's right; it's still there today. And people tell me that they've gone to that restaurant, and I think there are some photographs up there of Jack Ruby, as a matter of fact.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yes, it is.
Let me see if it's still on the map. Let me see if I can bring this up.
Should be able to get a photograph of it. What?
Elm Street,
Good.
Dallas.
Dorothy, who the Oswald couldn't have.
There it is.
Because you can see the thumb.
Oh yes, yeah. I want to. Good point. My wife just mentioned something. If you don't mind, while you're looking.
Sure, go ahead.
I want to show you how meticulous Dorothy Kilgallen was with her research. One of the first things that came out of Dallas was the fact that Lee Harvey Oswald shot JFK from the 6th floor book depository. So Dorothy heard of an account by a guy named Brenner, who said that he was standing at the base of the book depository building, and he looked up and he saw the rifle. He saw Oswald and the rifle coming out of the 6th floor window. So she decided to test that. When she got back to New York City, at 45 East 68th Street, right where the new sign is, she had her husband, Richard Calmer, stand in the window all the way up to the top of that building. I think it was at least 6 floors, and hold a broomstick. He showed himself out of the window with a broomstick, and she stood at the bottom, and she looked up at the window and couldn't see anything. And that was another thing that was a problem with her with regard to that whole situation with the shots coming from the book depository and all of that. That's how rigorous she was with finding the truth. And that always has, when I first found out about it, really impressed upon me that this was a woman that I wanted to write about for sure. Is that it there?
That's it. Campese's is still there as long as Google Maps is updated. But yeah, it's on Elm. Here it is. Pizza open since 1946.
Okay, there you go. So if people go to Dallas, they can go and have a sandwich at Campese's and look at photographs of Jack Ruby.
Relive it all. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Why do these assassinations happen in open areas? Who does the security? Well, that's a good question. Security is usually controlled or manipulated. Charlie Cook. Holy smokes.
Yeah, it's very difficult to, I don't get into that kind of thing very much because I'm not an expert with regard to it. But one more quick thing I'll tell you that is in the new book that not many people know about. There was actually another person who was shot in Daley Plaza the day that JFK was. Do you know about that?
Yeah, there was a bullet fragment that hit somebody in the eye, right?
The guy's name was Slade, I believe, or something like that. And he was standing at the curb in front of, the book, overpasses over here, the grassy knoll over here. He's standing down here, and all at once he feels blood on his cheek, and here's the bullet hit the curb and takes a piece out of the curb. James Tagg is his name, and so he's amazed at this. And what does he do with the information? He goes to the Dallas Morning News, and there's an article about it. Nobody made any big things. Then he tells the Warren Commission about it. Do you think he was ever summoned by the Warren Commission to testify? Absolutely not. So it's those kinds of things that pointed obviously to there being another shooter, or the shots came from the front and all of that. That's just been covered up. The worst offender of distortions of history, and I've tried to get them closed at time, is the 6th Floor Museum in Dallas.
Right.
That is an Oswald alone shrine, and they steal money from tourists who come to Dallas by showing them all of that. Do you think my book's in there? Do you think anybody else's books that disagree with Oswald alone aren't in there? They've made it into a merchandise shop. It's just a disgrace. And I've tried to be able to tell people, I've written a couple reviews and said, don't go to this place. It's a scam. But they still operate and distort history every single day.
There's more people walking over to look at the grassy knoll than there are walking into that museum. So you can go to Dealey Plaza and check that out, which also has like a Masonic triangle on there. Mark, we are at the 1 hour, 38-minute mark. We've done quite an overview of your book. Is there anything you'd like to add or anything I missed before we wrap it up? Or is there anything else you'd like to say?
So I hope I didn't go too long. But this is all important to me as a historian. I don't pretend to be the only person that has the truth about this. You've mentioned some things that happened, but I do believe with my contribution to history that I've given a very plausible explanation for what happened here, especially now. And again, I say, don't look at these the deaths by themselves. Look at go ahead and look at the chronicle that I have in there. Look at them in context, because I think that makes a an awful lot of difference for sure.
Look
And
at
then
all
get
these
in
books
touch
he's
with me.
done. 12 books. Yeah, you can get in touch with him. He's done other things. He's not a one trick pony, that's for sure. You've written about Merton, Tyson, Larry Bird, Belli, the Kennedys, and also probably
Holocaust book.
the greatest historian of note on Kilgallen. So pretty much know her backward and forward. Your website is markshawbooks.com, and
Yes, it
people
is,
can
and there's an
contact you there, right?
email address in there, but it's it's mshawin@yahoo, mshawin@yahoo. So please get in touch with me. I want to hear from you.
Yeah, so you can follow up with him there. And again, let me go back to this cover of the book. We covered in detail another one. Bring in Hoover and Sirhan and Marcello again. A lot of that stuff, very important. Full title of the
dots.
yeah, connects the dots. Abuse of power, connecting Robert Kennedy's assassination and with the murders of JFK and Dorothy Kilgallen, exposes who is responsible and why Sirhan deserves a new trial. He deserved to be let out of jail, in my opinion, too. So
Yes, he does. Thank you. I agree.
definitely on that.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody for listening. We had 135 live listeners, so thanks everybody for contributing and leaving questions and stuff like that. And I will put a link to Mark Shaw's website in the show notes. So thanks again, Mark Shaw.
Thank you, William. You're a good man.
All right, try. Stay there.